She doesn't think she could fix it. No one thinks she could fix it except her husband, who urges her to. So she decides that her solution is probably to pitch a TV series around the idea of a biracial character. And this is like prestige TV. It might be a streaming network or a broadcast network. We're not really sure as a reader. But the head of this network knows that the biracial population is the fastest growing group, or one of the fastest growing groups in America. And by 2050, the majority of the country is likely to be biracial. It's the new hot market to market to, the new hot demographic. So the executive and the producer are excited about the possibility of a series with a biracial character at the center. Is it your experience as the writer of books about mulattoes, as you put it, is that becoming more appealing to editors and executives? And are they willing to pay more money for it as a result?
You mean in Hollywood?
Well, in both, in the book world and in
in
television, because I know you've done some work in television. Nothing you've written has been produced. The books that have been optioned haven't been actually, produced either yet. So you have experience in both worlds, and I'd be interested in hearing your take on both.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started publishing, it was in the 90s with my first novel, and there really wasn't anything like that. And that was a novel about a young girl of mixed race and racial passing. And I was met with, I had like 8 rejections from agents when I first sent it out. And they would say, this is too specific. And
Is this Caucasian?
yeah, this is my novel Caucasia, and I don't recognize this family, and I don't understand this character's identity, and they're strange to me. And finally, I found an agent who really loved it and sold it, and yeah, when I published that book, it was met with a lot of acclaim, and I had this really great experience in terms of my first novel. But one of the things I kept hearing from publishers was, don't do this again. Don't keep writing about mixedness. Like, it's time to graduate onto something new and just leave that behind. And it was almost as if they thought that mixedness was a plot and not a world, and not a people, not a geography. And I've heard that over and over again when I publish that you're still writing about mixed people? Well, why are you just going to keep writing about mixed people? And I find that so interesting, because I never hear people say that to white authors who write about, say, a particular world of white people. And I actually don't hear it as much about black authors who write about blackness or black worlds or race. But when I write about my people, it's considered somehow a very special episode that I shouldn't do again. And I think part of the reason that I find that so sort of telling is that it's that idea that you're a predicament. You're not a world. And what I think of it as is this is the world I write from. This is the geography and the culture that I write from, and it's interracial America. It's mulatto America, and to me that is a whole world. That from that point I can write about anything else, as any other writer can. You can be from Dublin and keep writing about Dublin, but nobody says to you, stop writing about Dublin. You're writing about marriage or parenthood or class or divorce or all sorts of things, and this is the space that I write from. And so I think maybe 6 books in, people are beginning to get that this is just a world, and this is something I could write about forever and not repeat myself, because these are characters in different situations. But with television, I think they haven't yet gotten to it yet, and I think that was what I was exploring in this, is they've attempted it, but it hasn't been done well. And the idea is that you can write about mixed people, and it doesn't always have to be about their racial struggle. They can be the space that you begin from, and then move on to these other issues that we have, and write about us with complexity and nuance. And I haven't seen that done yet in television, but I think it's imminent. I think it's going to happen in my lifetime.
How close did you come to actually being part of TV? Have you done writing for television or rewriting other people's scripts?
I've actually only 3 times worked developing things and writing a pilot. I wrote a pilot for a show that was based on my work. I wrote an original pilot for a limited series that is still out there being shopped around. That's not to do with my work. And I've worked on another adaptation of one of my books. And so I've only worked in sort of mini rooms and in collaboration with one other writer. I've never actually been in a writer's room. Yeah, and I think Jane never gets that close to being in the writer's room either, though she longs to be in that room. And what I felt writing scripts is I really like it. It's very interesting and sort of technical feeling compared to writing novels. And I will continue to do it because it's a nice break between books, and it kind of can pay for your stove or something, to get a new stove in your kitchen. Like, there are actual financial benefits to doing it. But I think my soul is in the page and in writing novels and in being in control of the entire universe that I'm writing is really what feeds me on a much deeper level. And so I will never kind of fully abandon the written word. It just feeds me in a whole other way. And unfortunately, it doesn't literally feed me.
Right.
We're listening to Terry's interview with Danzy Senna, author of the novel Colored Television. Back after a break. This is Fresh Air.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from Workday. Workday is an HR and finance platform for forward thinkers, dedicated to propelling organizations, workforces, and industries into the future. Workday, moving business forever forward. And from Raymond James, a firm focused on transforming lives, businesses, and communities through tailored wealth management, banking, and capital market solutions. Disclosures at raymondjames.com.
This is Fresh Air. Let's get back to Terry's interview with Danzy Senna, author of the novel Colored Television. It was recorded last September. A recurring theme in her novels and in her memoir is what it's like to be biracial.
I want to talk with you a little bit about your childhood. So your mother was kind of from white Boston aristocracy in a way. Tell us a little bit about your mother's family tree and the most famous and infamous parts of it.
She comes from a very long line of Bostonians. Her father was a Harvard law professor. He was a civil rights lawyer, actually, and very liberal. And one of her great-grandfather was one of the founders of the Atlantic magazine, the Atlantic Monthly, and she had mayors, and it goes all the way back to not literally the Mayflower, but a different boat. And also in that history of these sort of learned Bostonians was the history of slavery, and some of the most horrific slave traders in American history were in her family in the Northeast corridor, the DeWolf family. And her father's middle name was DeWolf. So she has both this sort of wonderful literary history and then also this disturbing history of slavery in her family. But by the time I was born, we didn't have any of the money. We only had some silverware with those initials on it. And so it was kind of this tarnished, lost aristocracy feeling.
My impression is that you found out about the slave trader members of your family tree doing research, like from a book.
Yes.
It's not like your family talked to you about it. What was it like for you to learn that?
It was, I mean, the details in these books about my mother's family, my family, have really horrible details about, this man, this very powerful slave trader, cutting off the hands of the slaves whom he threw into the water, who were trying to hold on to the boat. There was terrible details in there, but I didn't experience it personally as shame or that this is my family. I think that I take as a given that these are all of our ancestors. We're all connected to these people. And, the idea that that's something special didn't come into my head. I thought, this is American history that I descend out of. And so my memoir was really kind of taking my family as a microcosm of our country's history, both sides of my family.
Mm-hmm. And you learned a lot about your father while writing a memoir about your childhood and your family. And your mother is from, this eminent Boston family, and your father spent some of his childhood in an orphanage. And, his family was very poor. Was that confusing to you growing up? And especially since growing up, in spite of your mother's background, your parents didn't have money because they lived in they were writers. They lived in a world of artists and bohemians, which was kind of outside of the official class structure of America.
The class identity for me was never sort of separated from the racial identity, in the sense of being sort of illegible again, because both my parents had so much education and they published books, but we were getting food stamps. And it